The Pedia. General Studies video lectures. Notes and practice question sets for engineering service examination, and other UPS conducted examinations. In this video we had discussed a subtopic of energy and environment, which is India and climate change. Comes under climate change. India and climate change. India's per capita emission levels will never exceed that of the per capita emission levels of developed countries. PM India. India cannot and will not take on emission reduction targets. India will continue to be a low-carbon economy. World Bank study. India's primary focus is on adaptation, with specific focus for mitigation. India has already unveiled a comprehensive national action plan on climate change. Only those nationally appropriate mitigation actions LMAs can be subject to international monitoring, reporting and verification that are enabled and supported by international finance and technology transfer. India wants a comprehensive approach to reducing emissions from deforestation, forest degradation and advocates that includes conservation, afforestation, and sustainable management of forests. India advocates collaborative research in future low-carbon technology and access to intellectual property rights as global public goods. Current carbon dioxide emissions in India. India's CO2 emissions per capita are well below the world's average. 1.02 metric ton. Observed climate and weather changes in India. India's National Communication County UNFCCC has consolidated some of the observed changes in climate parameters in India. 1. Surface temperature. At the national level, increase of 0.4 degrees C has been observed in surface air temperatures. Over the past century, a warming trend has been observed along the west coast, in central India, the interior peninsula, and northeastern India. Cooling trends have been observed in northwest India and parts of South India. 2. Rainfall. While the observed monsoon rainfall at the all India level does not show any significant trend, regional monsoon variations have been recorded. A trend of increasing monsoon seasonal rainfall has been found along the west coast, northern and Andhra Pradesh, and northwestern India. 10% to 12% of the normal over the last 100 years. While a trend of decreasing monsoon seasonal rainfall has been observed over eastern Madhya Pradesh, northeastern India, and some parts of Gujarat and Kerala. -6% to N-8% of the normal over the last 100 years. 3. Extreme weather events. The states of West Bengal and Gujarat have reported increasing trends. A decline has been observed in Orissa. 4. Rise in sea level. Sea level rise was between 1.06–1.75 millimeters per year. These rates are consistent with 1–2 millimeters per year global sea level rise estimates of IPC. 5. Impacts on Himalayan glaciers. Recession of some glaciers has occurred in some Himalayan regions in recent years. The trend is not consistent across the entire mountain chain. It is accordingly too early to establish long-term trends, or their causation, in respect of which there are several hypotheses. Current actions for adaptation and mitigation. Current Indian government expenditure on adaptation to climate variability exceeds 2.6% of the GDP. 1. Agriculture. 2. Risk financing programs support adaptation to climate impacts. The crop insurance scheme supports the insurance of farmers against climate risks, and the credit support mechanism facilitates the extension of credit to farmers, especially for crop failure due to climate variability. 2. Forestry. India has a strong and rapidly growing afforestation program. Forest Conservation Act of 1980, which aimed at stopping the clearing and degradation of forests through a strict, centralized control of the rights to use forest land and mandatory requirements of compensatory afforestation in case of any diversion of forest land for any non-forestry purpose. An aggressive afforestation and sustainable forest management program resulted in annual reforestation of 1.78 mha during 1985 to 1997, and is currently 1.1 mha annually. 3. Water. The National Water Policy 2002 stresses that non-conventional methods for utilization of water, including interbasin transfers, artificial recharge of groundwater, and desalination of brackish or seawater, as well as traditional water conservation practices like rainwater harvesting, including rooftop rainwater harvesting, should be practiced to increase the utilizable water resources. 4. Coastal regions. In coastal regions, restrictions have been imposed in the area between 200 meters and 500 meters of the HTL high tide line. Special restrictions have been imposed in the area up to 200 meters to protect the sensitive coastal ecosystems and prevent their exploitation. 5. Health. The prime objective present of health programs is the surveillance and control of vector-borne diseases such as malaria, kala-azar, Japanese encephalitis, filaria and dengue. Programs also provide for emergency medical relief in the case of natural calamities, and to train and develop human resources for these tasks. 6. Disaster management. The National Disaster Management Program provides grants in aid to victims of weather-related disasters, and manages disaster relief operations. It also supports proactive disaster prevention programs, including dissemination of information and training of disaster management staff. India's National Action Plan on Climate Change. The National Action Plan hinges on the development and use of new technologies. The implementation of the plan would be through appropriate institutional mechanisms suited for effective delivery of each individual mission's objectives and include public-private partnerships and civil society action. 8 national missions. 1. National Solar Mission. The National Solar Mission is a major initiative of the Government of India and state governments to promote ecologically sustainable growth while addressing India's energy security challenge. To establish India as a global leader in solar energy. The mission will adopt a 3-phase approach. Remaining period of the 11th plan and first year of the 12th plan up to 2012 to 13 as Phase 1. The remaining 4 years of the 12th Plan 2013-17 as Phase 2. The 13th Plan 2017-22 as Phase 3. There will be an evaluation of progress, review of capacity and targets for subsequent phases. Mission targets are: 1. To create an enabling policy framework for the deployment of 20,000 MW of solar power by 2022. 2. To ramp up capacity of grid-connected solar power generation to 1,000 MW within 3 years by 2013. An additional 3,000 MW by 2017 through the mandatory use of the renewable purchase obligation by utilities backed with a preferential tariff. 3. To create favorable conditions for solar manufacturing capability, particularly solar thermal for indigenous production and market leadership. 4. To promote programs for off-grid applications, reaching 1,000 MW by 2017 and 2,000 MW by 2022. 5. To achieve 15 million square meters solar thermal collector area by 2017 and 20 million by 2022. 6. To deploy 20 million solar lighting systems for rural areas by 2022. 2. The National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency in ME. To strengthen the market for energy efficiency by creating conducive regulatory and policy regime. Mission goals. Market-based approaches to unlock energy efficiency opportunities. 4 new initiatives to enhance energy efficiency. A Perform, Achieve and Trade PAT. B. Market transformation for energy efficiency. C. Energy efficiency financing platform EAP. D. Framework for energy efficient economic development FEED. 3. National Mission on Sustainable Habitat. To promote sustainability of habitats through improvements in energy efficiency in buildings, urban planning, improved management of solid and liquid waste, modal shift towards public transport and conservation through appropriate changes in legal and regulatory framework. It also seeks to improve ability of habitats to adapt to climate change by improving resilience of infrastructure, community-based disaster management and measures for improving advance warning systems for extreme weather events. 4. National Water Mission (NWM) mission objectives. Ensuring integrated water resource management for conservation of water, minimization of wastage and equitable distribution both across and within states. Developing a framework for optimum water use through increase in water use efficiency by 20% through regulatory mechanisms with differential entitlements and pricing, taking the National Water Policy (NWP) into consideration. 5. National Mission for Sustaining the Himalayan Ecosystem (NMSHE). The most crucial and primary objective of the mission is to develop a sustainable national capacity to continuously assess the health status of the Himalayan ecosystem and enable policy bodies in their policy formulation functions and assist states in the Indian Himalayan region with their implementation of actions selected for sustainable development. 6. National Mission for a Green India. Increased forest/tree cover on 5 million hectares of forest/non-forest lands and improved quality of forest cover on another 5 million ha of non-forest/forest lands, a total of 10 million ha. Improved ecosystem services including biodiversity, hydrological services, and carbon sequestration from the 10 million ha of forest/non-forest lands mentioned above. 7. National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture. The NSA has identified 10 key dimensions for adaptation and mitigation. 1. Improved crop seeds, livestock and fish culture. 2. Water efficiency. 3. Pest management. 4. Improved farm practices. 5. Nutrient management. 6. Agricultural insurance. 7. Credit support. 8. Markets. 9. Access to information. 10. Livelihood diversification. The National Mission on Strategic Knowledge for Climate Change and MSKCC. Not complete. Formation of knowledge networks among the existing knowledge institutions. Engaged in research and development relating to climate science and facilitating data sharing and exchange through a suitable policy framework and institutional support. Establishment of global technology watch groups with institutional capacities to carry out research on risk-minimized technology selection for developmental choices. Development of national capacity for modeling the regional impact of climate change. Establishing research networks and encouraging research in the areas of climate change impacts on important socio-economic sectors. Building alliances and partnerships through global collaboration in research technology development. National Bioenergy Mission. To boost power generation from biomass, a renewable energy source abundantly available in India. Launched during the 12th Five-Year Plan, will offer a policy and regulatory environment to facilitate large-scale capital investments in biomass-fired power stations. It will also encourage development of rural enterprises. It will also propose a GIS-based national biomass resource atlas to map potential biomass regions in the country. Adopt a two-phase approach, spanning the 12th Plan in phase and the 13th Plan. In Phase 2, Indian Network on Climate Change Assessment. INCA was launched in October 2009 by the Ministry of Environment and Forests (MEF) in an effort to promote domestic research on climate change and build on the country's climate change expertise. Consists of over 120 institutions and over 250 scientists countrywide, is aimed at bringing in more science-based policy-making, based on measurement, monitoring and modeling. Reports prepared by the INCA will form a part of India's National Communication Natcom to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change UNFCCC. INCA First Assessment. INCA prepared the country's greenhouse gas GHG emission data India greenhouse gas emissions 2007 in 2010, which said, the country's emissions grew by 58% during 1994 to 2007. Inca, second assessment climate change and India a 4x4 assessment. 4 regions and 4 sector. A 4x4 assessment addresses the impact of climate change in 2030s to the natural resources and livelihoods of the people in the 4 climate-sensitive regions of Himalayan region, Northeast region, the Western Ghats and the coastal plains for the 4 key sectors of agriculture, water, health and natural ecosystems and biodiversity. Using a regional climate model precise impacts agriculture. Up to 50% reduction in maize yields. 4-35% reduction in rice yields with some exceptions. Rising coconut yields with some exceptions. Reduced apple production. Forests and natural ecosystems increased net primary productivity. National communication NatCom. National communication NatCom to the UNFCCC has been initiated in 2002, funded by the Global Environment Facility under its enabling activities program through the United Nations Development Programme, New Delhi, to communicate the following information to the Secretariat of the Conference of Parties. A national inventory of anthropogenic emissions by sources and removal by sink of all GHGs not controlled by the Montreal Protocol. What is Montreal Protocol? A general description of steps taken or envisaged by the party to implement the Convention. The Ministry of Environment and Forests (MEF) is implementing and executing agency of the project. Base year 1994. Creation of reliable and comprehensive database for all the outputs produced through the establishment of a data center DC. The areas of energy, industrial processes, agriculture land use and land use change and forestry life and waste. The gases to be inventoried include carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydro, fluorocarbons, perfluorocarbon and sulfur hexafluoride released from various anthropogenic sources of the base year 1994. Strengthening of the ecology security is one of the goals of the MGNREGA. MGNREGA is designed to strengthen the ongoing effort for water harvesting, watershed management, and soil health care and enhancement. India's policy structure relevant to GHG mitigation. The Integrated Energy Policy was adopted in 2006. Promotion of energy efficiency in all sectors, emphasis on mass transport, emphasis on renewables, including biofuels plantations. Efficiency in all sectors, emphasis on mass transport, emphasis on renewables, including biofuels plantations, accelerated development of nuclear and hydropower for clean energy. Focus rode on several clean energy-related technology. The Rural Electrification Policy, 2006. It promotes renewable energy technology where grid connectivity is not possible or cost-effective. Energy Conservation Building Code was launched in May 2007, which addresses the design of new, large commercial buildings to optimize the building's energy demand based on their location in different climatic zones. Compliance with ECOC norms is voluntary at present, but is expected to soon become mandatory. Green building. Buildings are one of the major pollutants that affect urban air quality and contribute to climate change. The aim of a green building design is to 1. Minimize the demand on non-renewable resources and maximize the utilization efficiency of these resources when in use, and maximize reuse and recycling of available resources. 2. Utilization of renewable resources. It costs a little more to design and construct a green building. However, it costs less to operate a green building. Building system designed in a way to efficiently use vac heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, lighting, electrical, and water heating. Integration of renewable energy sources to generate energy on-site. Green rating for integrated habitat assessment. GRIHA. GRIHA is a Sanskrit word meaning abode. GRIHA has been conceived by TERI and developed jointly with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India. The green building rating system devised by TERI and NR is a voluntary scheme to help design green buildings and, in turn, help evaluate the greenness of the buildings. GRIHA is a rating tool that helps people assess the performance of their building against certain nationally acceptable benchmarks and is suitable for all kinds of buildings in different climatic zones of the country. Building is assessed based on its predicted performance over its entire life cycle, inception through operation. The stages of the life cycle that have been identified for evaluation are pre-construction stage, building operation, and maintenance stage. GRIHA rating system consists of 34 criteria categorized under 4 categories. 1. Site selection and site planning. 2. Conservation and efficient utilization of resources. 3. Building operation and maintenance. And 4. Innovation points. It means that a project intending to meet the criterion would qualify for the points. Different levels of certification 1 star to 5 stars are awarded based on the number of points earned. The minimum points required for certification is 50. Energy audits of large industrial consumers. In March 2007, the conduct of energy audits was made mandatory in large energy-consuming units in 9 industrial sectors. These units, notified as designated consumers, are also required to employ certified energy managers and report energy consumption and energy conservation data annually. Mass transport. The National Urban Transport Policy emphasizes extensive public transport facilities and non-motorized modes over personal vehicles. The expansion of the metro rail transportation system in Delhi and other cities, Chennai, Bangalore, Jaipur, etc. Clean air initiatives. By introduction of compressed natural gas (CNG) in Delhi and other cities. 2. Retiring old, polluting vehicles. And 3. Strengthening of mass transportation. Some state governments provide subsidies for purchase and use of electric vehicles. For thermal power plant, the installation of electrostatic precipitators is mandatory. Promotion of energy-saving devices. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency has introduced the Bachad Lamp Yojana, a program under which households may exchange incandescent lamps for CFLs. Compact fluorescent lamps using Clean Development Mechanism (CDM). Credits to equate purchase price. Promotion of biofuels. The biodiesel purchase policy mandates biodiesel procurement by the petroleum industry. A mandate on ethanol blending of gasoline requires 5% blending of ethanol with gasoline from the 1st of January, 2003, in 9 states and 4 union territories. Indian Solar Loan Program. In April 2003, the United Nations Environment Programme (UNEP) initiated a 3-year program, credit facility in southern India to help rural households finance the purchase of solar home systems. Canara Bank and Syndicate Bank, along with their 8 associate regional rural banks, partnered with UNEP. Assistance with technical issues, vendor qualification, and other activities to develop the institutional capacity for this type of finance. National Initiative on Climate Resilient Agriculture (NICRA). The EGA has launched National Initiative on Climate Resilient Agriculture (NICRA) during 2010-11 with an outlay of Rs.350 crores for the 11th plan. This initiative will primarily enhance the resilience of Indian agriculture, covering crops, livestock and fisheries. The project is comprised of 4 components: strategic research on adaptation and mitigation, technology demonstration on farmers' fields to cope with current climate variability, sponsored and competitive research grants to fill critical research gaps, capacity building of different stakeholders. The project is focusing on crops like wheat, rice, maize, pigeon pea, groundnut, tomato, mango and banana. Cattle, buffalo and small ruminants among livestock and both marine and freshwater fish species of economic importance. The major research themes are vulnerability assessment of major production zones, linking weather-based agro-advisories to contingency planning, assessing the impacts and evolving varieties tolerant to key climatic stresses, drought, heat, frost, flooding, etc., evolving adaptation and mitigation strategies, continuous monitoring of greenhouse gases, studying changes in pest dynamics, adaptation strategies in livestock, harnessing the beneficial effects of temperature in inland and marine fisheries. 7 major research institutes of the EGA will work in unison to evolve coping Technologies with Central Research Institute for Drill and Agriculture Krida, Hyderabad is the lead center. BSE GreenX. The BSE GreenX Index is a veritable first step in creating a credible market-based response mechanism in India, whereby both businesses and investors can rely upon purely quantitative and objective performance-based signals to assess carbon performance. Trade Carbon X Rating Services Private Limited Trade is a company based in India, which has co-developed the BSE Green Index in close association with the BSE. Includes the top 20 companies which are good in terms of carbon emissions, free float market capitalization, and turnover. Cap-weighted free float market capitalization weighted index comprising from the list of BSE 100 index. LST October 2008 base date with the base index value of 1000. Rebalanced on a biannual basis, that is end of March and September quarters. The September quarter review will be based on the fresh set of carbon emission numbers, and the March quarter review will be based on the existing carbon emission numbers, but latest financial data. Climate Change Organizations. UNFCCC. UN Summit Conference on Environment and Development held in Rio de Janeiro in June 1992 adopted, by consensus, the first multilateral legal instrument on climate change, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC. There are now 195 parties to the convention. All subsequent multilateral negotiations on different aspects of climate change, including both adaptation and mitigation, are being held based on the principles and objectives set out by the UNFCCC. Kyoto Protocol COP3. To strengthen the global response to climate change. The Kyoto Protocol was adopted in Kyoto, Japan, on the 11th of December 1997. Due to a complex ratification process, it entered into force on the 16th of February 2005. Kyoto Protocol is what operationalizes the convention. It commits industrialized countries to stabilize greenhouse gas emissions based on the principles of the convention. The major distinction between the protocol and the convention is that while the convention encouraged industrialized countries to stabilize GHG emissions, the protocol commits them to do so. Sets binding emission reduction targets for 37 industrialized countries and the European Community in its first commitment period. It only binds developed countries. KP places a heavier burden on developed nations under its central principle that of common but differentiated responsibility. These targets add up to an average 5% emissions reduction compared to 1990 levels over the 5-year period 2008 to 2012. KP is made up of reporting and verification procedures, flexible market-based mechanisms, which in turn have their own governance procedures, a compliance system. So, two things make KP tick. 1. Emissions reduction commitments. The first was binding emissions reduction commitments for developed country parties. This meant the space to pollute was limited. Carbon dioxide became a new commodity. KP now began to internalize what was now recognized as an UN priced externality. 2. Flexible market mechanisms. Joint implementation G. The Clean Development Mechanism CDM. Emission trading. The objectives of Kyoto mechanisms. Stimulate sustainable development through technology transfer and investment. Help countries with Kyoto commitments to meet their targets by reducing emissions or removing carbon from the atmosphere in other countries in a cost-effective way. Encourage the private sector and developing countries to contribute to emission reduction efforts. Joint implementation allows a country with an emission reduction or limitation commitment under the Kyoto Protocol to earn emission reduction units from an emission reduction or emission removal project in another Annex B party, each equivalent to 1 ton of CO2, which can be counted towards meeting its Kyoto target. Projects starting as from the year 2000 may be eligible as G projects, a rule issued from 2008. Clean Development Mechanism allows a country with an emission reduction or emission limitation commitment under the Kyoto Protocol Annex B party to implement an emission reduction project in developing countries. It is the first global environmental investment and credit scheme of its kind. Such projects can earn saleable certified emission reductions credits, each equivalent to 1 ton of CO2, which can be counted towards meeting Kyoto targets. Example: a CDM project activity might involve, for example, a rural electrification project using solar panels or the installation of more energy-efficient boilers. The mechanism stimulates sustainable development and emission reductions, while giving industrialized countries some flexibility in how they meet their emission reduction or limitation targets. Most of the CDM projects were implemented in China and India as climate in these countries is favorable for implementing projects for almost all spheres. Carbon trading. The name given to the exchange of emission permits. This exchange may take place within the economy or may take the form of international transaction. 2 types of carbon trading. 1. Emission trading. Emission permit is known alternatively as carbon credit. 2. Offset trading. Another variant of carbon credit is to be earned by a country by investing some amount of money in such projects, known as carbon projects, which will emit lesser amount of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. Non-compliance of Kyoto and penalties. If a country does not meet the requirements for measurements and reporting, said country loses the privilege of gaining credit through joint implementation projects. If a country goes above its emissions cap, and does not try to make up the difference through any of the mechanisms available, then said country must make up the difference, plus an additional 30% during the next period. The country could also be banned from participating in the cap and trade program. Barley meat. Bali Meet was the meeting of 190 countries that are party to the UN Treaty on Climate Change held in December 2007. To discuss what happens after 2012, what are countries expected to do after the first phase of Kyoto ends in 2012. Bali Roadmap includes the Bali Action Plan BAP, the Ad Hoc Working Group on Further Commitments for Annex I parties under the Kyoto Protocol negotiations and their 2009 deadline, launch of the Adaptation Fund, decisions on technology transfer and on reducing emissions from deforestation. Bali Action Plan BAP. A shared vision for long-term cooperative action, including long-term global goal for emission reductions. Enhanced national/international action on mitigation of climate change. Enhanced action on adaptation. Enhanced action on technology development and transfer to support action on mitigation and adaptation. Enhanced action on the provision of financial resources and investment to support action on mitigation and adaptation and technology cooperation. COP15 Copenhagen Summit. The summit concluded with the COP taking a note of Copenhagen Accord, a five-nation accord basic and as. The Copenhagen Accord is a non-binding agreement. Developed countries in exile agreed to set targets for reductions in their greenhouse gas emissions by 2020. Developing countries agree to pursue nationally appropriate mitigation strategies to slow the growth of their emissions, but are not committed to reducing their carbon output. Developed countries would raise funds of $30 billion from 2010 to 2012 of new and additional resources. Agrees a goal for the world to raise $100 billion per year by 2020. New multilateral funding for adaptation will be delivered, with a governance structure. COP16 Cancun Summit. All parties to the convention, including the developed and developing countries, have agreed to report their voluntary mitigation goals for implementation. Decisions were taken at Cancun to set up a Green Climate Fund, a technology mechanism, and an adaptation committee at global level to support developing country actions for adaptation and mitigation. Process to design a Green Climate Fund. Mechanism of COP16. 1. Technology mechanism in 16th session of the COP in Cancun 2010. Facilitate the implementation of enhanced action on technology development and transfer in order to support action on mitigation and adaptation to climate change. 2. Green Climate Fund will support projects, program, policies and other activities in developing country parties. The fund will be governed by the GCF board. 3. The Adaptation Fund was established to finance concrete adaptation projects and programs in developing country parties to the Kyoto Protocol that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. Financed from the share of proceeds on the Clean Development Mechanism. Project activities. 4. Adaptation Committee, providing technical support and guidance to the parties. Sharing of relevant information, knowledge, experience and good practices. Promoting synergy and strengthening engagement with national, regional, and international organizations, centers and networks. Considering information communicated by parties on their monitoring and review of adaptation actions, support provided and received. COP17 Durban Summit. India had gone to Durban with two major demands: that the principle of equity remain intact in any new climate regime, and that this new global deal be launched after 2020. Outcome: New Deal to be finalized by 2015 and launched by 2020. Second phase of Kyoto Protocol secured. Green Climate Fund launched, though empty as yet. Green Tech Development mechanism put in place. Equity finds place back in future climate talks. Adaptation mechanism. Transparency mechanism. India regains leadership of developing world, wins on all its important non-negotiable, common but differentiated responsibility principle retained. India secures 10 years of economic growth without carbon containment. Intellectual property rights and technology not as well anchored in New Deal loopholes for developed world not fully blocked. Agriculture brought in by developed nations under climate change. Red. Reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation is the global endeavor to create an incentive for developing countries to protect, better manage, and save their forest resources, thus contributing to the global fight against climate change. Red goes beyond merely checking deforestation and forest degradation, and includes incentives for positive elements of conservation, sustainable management of forests and enhancement of forest carbon stocks. Red conceptualizes flow of positive incentives for demonstrated reduction in deforestation or for enhancing quality and expanse of forest cover. India has made a submission to UNFCCC on RED, Sustainable Management of FORESTSMF, and Afforestation and Reforestation, in December 2008. The Chief Global Environment Facility, to function under the guidance of the UNFCCC COP and be accountable to the COP. Established in 1991 by the World Bank in consultation with the United Nations Development Programme and the United Nations Environment Programme UNEP, to provide funding to protect the global environment. The GIF now has 6 focal areas. 1. Biological diversity. 2. Climate change. 3. International waters. 4. Land degradation, primarily desertification and deforestation. 5. Ozone layer depletion. And 6. Persistent organic pollutants. Climate-smart agriculture. While agriculture is the sector most vulnerable to climate change, it is also a major cause, directly accounting for about 14% of greenhouse gas emissions in 2007. This is called the triple win interventions that would increase yields, poverty, reduction and food security, make yields more resilient in the face extremes, adaptation, and make the farm a solution to the climate change problem rather than part of the problem mitigation. These triple wins are likely to require a package of interventions and be country and locality specific in their application. This method of practicing agriculture is called climate-smart agriculture. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change (IPCC), established by the United Nations Environment Programme UNEP and the World Meteorological Organization (WMO) in 1988 to provide the governments of the world with a clear scientific view of what is happening to the world's climate. Headquarters in Geneva. Currently 195 countries are members of the IPCC. The IPCC is a scientific body. It reviews and assesses the most recent scientific, technical and socio-economic information produced worldwide relevant to the understanding of climate change. It does not conduct any research, nor does it monitor climate-related data or parameters. Key AR5 cross-cutting themes will be water and the Earth system change, impacts and responses, carbon cycle including ocean acidification, ice sheets and sea level rise, mitigation, adaptation and sustainable development, and Article 2 of the UNFCCC for definition. National Greenhouse Gas Inventories Program (GIP). The IPCC established an GIP to provide methods for estimating national inventories of greenhouse gas emissions to and removals from the atmosphere. Green economy. The green economy can be considered synonymous to a sustainable economy. However, the green economy concept often carries a more distinctive meaning. Green economy focuses specifically on the fundamental changes that are required to ensure that economic systems are made more sustainable. Green economy focuses on the ways to overcome the deeply rooted causes of unsustainable economic development. A green economy is one whose growth in income and employment is driven by public and private investments that reduce carbon emissions and pollution, enhance energy and resource efficiency, and prevent the loss of biodiversity and Three priorities in transition of economy to green economy are: decarbonizes the economy, commit the environmental community to justice and equity, and conserve the biosphere. Next we will be discussed about a new topic of energy and environment, which is environmental impact assessment.